Hey, Hillside. So I recently read through First and Second Corinthians, and I read through them like really in one sitting, or maybe broken up, but in one day, the first one, and then the second one another day. And first of all, wow, what a difference it makes when you read one of the epistles as it was intended as a full, complete letter, rather than taking it, chapter by chapter, a couple at a time, and you can really connect it all and see the main message and the themes. But and then even that in First and Second Corinthians, how the two are related to each other, right? So in the first one, Paul's writing to the church in Corinth and telling them, is pretty hard. It's a hard letter, and it's, really getting on them. Like, I can't believe, I'm hearing there's this and this about you going on within the church, and really calling them to repentance and something different. And so the big one, one of the big ones being, he addresses sexual immorality, and he is like shocked and appalled that this could be going on in the church, and really kind of indicates maybe a particular instance that he's heard about, and telling them, how they shouldn't be associated with this, a person who calls himself a believer but is doing this, put him out of the church so that he can understand. He'll see the negative effects or the repercussions and understand the error of his ways, hopefully. Okay, and so then he comes back in the second letter, and in the beginning he kind of addresses this, and he's saying, I was going to come to you, but I didn't, because after I wrote that to you, you guys were like grieved, and you guys were feeling sorry, right? But I was happy that it had an effect, and so I didn't want to come to you and be happy when you guys were sad, and I wanted us all to be happy together, but now you have learned from it, and now you're happy because you saw the good it did, so I'll come to you later. Anyway, right? He works through that. But in doing that, in writing this, he also tells them, he addresses that situation. He's like commending them for addressing that situation, because they did, in fact, it sounds like, listen, right? He says that they put out that, it seems like they put out the man who was committing a wrong, and he says the punishment, which was inflicted by the majority, is sufficient for this man. Like, you've punished him enough, he learned. But then he calls them to, and he goes, so that on the contrary, you ought rather to forgive and comfort him, lest he be swallowed up by the sorrow, lest it overtake him, the idea of being separated from the church now. So I really got this balance in First and Second Corinthians, of where we go towards correcting people, but then also like accepting them back in, and and offering forgiveness, and reaffirming our love. So there's like, he has this balance, right? He writes to them and he's trying to correct them, and they go full bore on that, but then they seemed to maybe be too legalistic. They didn't open the door back in for restoration once the guy had repented and realized he was wrong. And so then he goes back to them and he's like, okay, now we need grace, right? So it's just this balance of when we offer, when do we speak truth to people and do the hard things that we have to do. And he even says how hard it was to write that letter. He's saying, I wrote to you in tears and in anguish. And so I don't see the exact spot, but he says that also in Second Corinthians, that first letter was hard to write, but he had to do it. And I'm sure likewise it was hard for them to put that man out. But then he's like, okay, open your door back up, let him in. So I guess just thinking about what's that look like in my life and in my relationships, to walk that balance of speaking into people, but also like, and partially because of humility, because we know that we need forgiveness too. So that humility of like, but then being able to accept people back in when they do realize, when they acknowledge, that wasn't right, and I'm seeking repentance and forgiveness. So, that's all I have for you today, and we'll see you next time, Hillside.